The moment your own child starts telling people you're losing your mind, you begin to question every memory you have. I still remember the exact smell of charcoal and lighter fluid that evening because it was the last normal family dinner I ever had. My son Daniel was standing beside the grill in his pressed blue button-down shirt, smiling at neighbors while flipping burgers like some perfect suburban father from a TV commercial. My granddaughter Claire was hanging paper lanterns across the patio fence, and Emily was inside arranging potato salad and baked beans into serving bowls she probably bought from Target that same morning. It was Daniel's 41st birthday party, and for the first time in months, I had actually been excited to go somewhere. I had spent nearly an hour curling my hair and putting on lipstick I hadn't worn since Easter because when you're 68 and living alone in a quiet Ohio neighborhood, family dinners start feeling like holidays. I walked into the backyard carrying Daniel's favorite lemon pound cake, the one I used to bake for him when he was little, and before I even made it to the patio table, he looked at me and laughed softly. "Mom forgot again," he said. Everyone chuckled politely like I'd missed some harmless joke. I forced a smile. "Forgot what?" I asked. Daniel exchanged a look with Emily before taking the cake from my hands. "You already brought dessert earlier this afternoon," he said gently, the same way nurses talk to confused patients in hospital waiting rooms. "You don't remember?" The backyard suddenly felt too quiet. I stared at him because I knew for a fact I had not been there earlier. I'd spent the afternoon watering my roses and watching an old rerun of Wheel of Fortune while waiting for 6 o'clock. "No," I said carefully. "I've been home all day." Daniel gave a sad little nod that made my stomach tighten. "See," he said quietly to Emily, though loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "That's what I've been talking about." My sister Linda stopped pouring iced tea. My neighbor Carol looked away awkwardly. And then Daniel said the sentence that changed everything. "Mom's dementia is getting worse." I felt the blood drain from my face so quickly I had to steady myself against the patio chair. Dementia. The word echoed in my head while conversations around me slowly resumed like nothing had happened. Emily touched my arm with fake sympathy. "You know we only worry because we love you, Margaret." Love? Funny how people always use that word right before they take something from you. I laughed nervously because I honestly thought this had to be some misunderstanding. "Daniel, don't be ridiculous," I said. "I'm fine." But Daniel kept smiling that calm, patient smile. "Nobody said you weren't fine, Mom." Then he lowered his voice slightly. "But forgetting entire afternoons isn't normal." Claire looked up from the lanterns, confused. "Grandma wasn't here earlier," she said. "I was home from school all day." For one brief second, Daniel's expression changed. Just a flicker. Sharp. Annoyed. Then it disappeared behind that polished grin again. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "you probably just didn't see her." Emily quickly changed the subject after that, but the damage had already been done. The rest of the evening felt strange. Every time I misplaced my reading glasses or asked someone to repeat themselves over the music, I noticed people exchanging looks. Concerned looks. Careful looks. Like they were monitoring me. Testing me. Watching for signs. And Daniel kept doing it over and over. "Mom, did you already take your medication?" "Mom, maybe sit down before you get dizzy." "Mom, remember what your doctor said about stress." By the time the sun went down and the citronella candles were lit around the patio, I no longer felt like Daniel's mother. I felt like a fragile old woman everyone pitied. And the most terrifying part was this: my son had planted that idea so smoothly, so naturally, that I could actually feel people beginning to believe him. The strange thing about being treated like you are fragile is that people stop speaking to you normally long before you notice it happening. 3 days after Daniel's birthday dinner, I walked into my local grocery store and suddenly forgot why I felt uncomfortable there. Then I saw Carol Simmons from 2 houses down pushing her cart near the produce section. She gave me that careful smile again. The same smile people use at funerals. "How are you feeling today, Margaret?" she asked softly. Feeling. Not doing. Not living. Feeling. Like I had become a patient overnight instead of a retired librarian buying bananas and coffee creamer. "I am perfectly fine," I answered, probably too quickly. Carol nodded with exaggerated patience. "That is good. Daniel said you have good days and bad days." I stood there frozen beside a stack of Honeycrisp apples while heat crept into my chest. Daniel had been talking about me. Not just at the birthday dinner. Everywhere. By the time I got home, I was shaking so badly I spilled half my groceries onto the kitchen floor. I remember staring at a can of tomato soup rolling across the tile, while one terrible thought kept circling in my head. What else had he been telling people? That afternoon I tried logging into my online banking account to pay my electric bill, but my password would not work. I tried again 3 times before the screen locked me out completely. I called customer support thinking it was some simple technical problem, but the young man on the phone sounded confused. "It looks like another authorized contact updated your security settings yesterday," he explained. "Authorized contact?" I repeated. "Yes, Daniel Whitmore." My stomach dropped so suddenly I had to sit down at the kitchen table. "There must be some mistake," I whispered. "My son is not authorized on my account." The representative hesitated. "According to the notes here, your son stated there were concerns regarding cognitive decline and financial vulnerability." Cognitive decline. The word sounded clinical and cold, like something printed in a hospital chart. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall for almost 10 minutes. Then I called Daniel immediately. He answered cheerfully on the second ring. "Hey Mom. Why are you on my bank account?" I asked. Silence. Just for a second. Then his voice softened into that same calm tone he had been using lately. "Mom, do not get upset. I was only trying to help after what happened at the birthday dinner." "Nothing happened," I snapped. "I am not confused. You forgot an entire visit to the house." "Because I was never there." He sighed heavily like an exhausted parent dealing with a stubborn child. "Mom, this is exactly what I mean. You get defensive anytime someone tries to help you." I could hear Emily talking quietly in the background. Then Daniel lowered his voice. "Listen, we are worried about you living alone. I have lived alone for 11 years. And maybe it is getting harder now." I gripped the edge of the counter so tightly my fingers hurt. "Take your name off my account." Another pause. "I really think we should discuss this together as a family." Family. Suddenly that word felt less like comfort, and more like a trap closing around me inch by inch. The next morning I noticed something else strange. My spare house key was missing from the ceramic bowl near the front door. I searched the kitchen drawers, my purse, even the pockets of my winter coats hanging in the hallway closet. Gone? By lunchtime Emily showed up unexpectedly carrying soup in a paper bag from Panera Bread. "Daniel said you sounded overwhelmed yesterday," she said sweetly while walking into my kitchen without waiting to be invited. She opened my refrigerator like she owned the house. "You really should not stress yourself out over finances right now." I stared at her carefully. "Did Daniel give you my spare key?" Emily smiled without looking at me. "We just want to make sure somebody can get inside in case of an emergency." Emergency. Another word that suddenly followed me everywhere. Then she reached into her purse and placed a small orange pill organizer on my kitchen table. Monday through Sunday written in giant black letters. This might help with memory issues, she said gently. And that was the moment I realized something terrifying. They were not reacting to confusion. They were building it around me piece by piece. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from realizing people no longer trust your version of reality. It started quietly after the birthday dinner. Fewer phone calls. Shorter conversations. Strange pauses whenever I entered a room. My younger sister Linda used to call me every morning while drinking coffee, but suddenly she only texted once every few days asking vague questions like, "How are you feeling today?" or "Did you remember your appointment this week?" I finally asked her directly what Daniel had been saying about me. There was a long silence on the phone before she answered carefully. "He is just worried, Margaret." Worried. That word again. "Do you think I have dementia?" I asked. Another silence. Longer this time. "I think maybe you should let Daniel help more." I hung up before she could hear me cry. That was the first night I sat alone in my living room and truly understood what was happening. Daniel had already prepared everyone before I even realized there was a story being written about me. Every conversation now felt like a test I did not know I was taking. If I repeated myself, people noticed. If I misplaced my glasses, they exchanged looks. If I became upset, they treated it as proof that I was unstable. And once people believe you are confused, every attempt to defend yourself sounds like confusion too. A week later Daniel showed up at my house without warning carrying 2 grocery bags, and one of those fake cheerful smiles that never reached his eyes anymore. "I thought I would help stock your kitchen," he said while letting himself inside with my spare key. I hated how naturally he used it. He moved through my house like ownership had already changed hands. While putting cereal boxes into my pantry, he casually asked, "Did you pay the water bill this month?" "Of course I did," I answered sharply. He nodded slowly. "Okay. Good." Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded notice from the county utilities office. "Because this came to my house yesterday." My chest tightened. "Past due notice." Red letters across the top. I grabbed it from his hand immediately. "This is impossible. I never missed payments." "Never." Daniel shrugged gently. "Mom, things slip sometimes." I marched straight to my desk drawer, where I kept my monthly bills organized in neat folders, but the water bill was gone. Completely gone. I stood there pulling papers out one by one while Daniel watched quietly from the hallway. "I know I had it," I whispered. "I know I paid it." "Nobody is blaming you," he said softly. "This is exactly why I think you need help managing things." I could hear it then. The carefulness in his voice. The patience. The performance. But the worst part was that I suddenly doubted myself for half a second. Just half a second. Enough to terrify me. Later that night I drove to the utility office myself and discovered the bill had not actually been late at all. The payment had cleared 5 days earlier. I sat frozen in my car afterward staring at the receipt in my hands while one thought repeated itself over and over. Then why did Daniel have a past due notice? I barely slept that night. Around 2 in the morning I walked into the kitchen for tea and noticed something strange near the trash can. A torn white envelope with the utility company logo. I pulled it out carefully and flattened the paper against the counter. It was the original bill statement addressed to me. Someone had taken it from my mailbox before I ever saw it. Suddenly dozens of little moments started connecting inside my head. Missing mail. Changed passwords. Questions about my memory. Concerned neighbors. The pill organizer. The spare key. It was all happening too smoothly to be accidental. The next afternoon Claire stopped by after school while Daniel and Emily were both at work. She sat at my kitchen counter eating pretzels while scrolling through her phone, unusually quiet. Then she looked up at me carefully. "Grandma," she asked softly, "are you actually sick?" The question hurt more than I expected. I forced a smile. "Do I seem sick to you?" Claire hesitated. "Dad keeps saying you forget things." I leaned closer across the counter. "Claire, listen to me very carefully. I am not losing my memory." She studied my face for several seconds. Then she whispered something that made ice run through my veins. "Then why did Dad tell Mom you would probably forget signing paperwork?" After Claire left that afternoon, I sat alone at my kitchen table for nearly an hour staring at the steam rising from a cold cup of coffee. Signing paperwork. The words would not leave my head. Daniel had already been changing passwords, collecting mail, and talking to banks behind my back. Now there was paperwork too. I suddenly remembered something else strange from the week before. Emily had tried to convince me to simplify my finances by moving everything into one shared family account for emergencies. At the time I thought it was intrusive. Now it felt calculated. I started paying attention after that. Really paying attention. And once I did, I realized how carefully Daniel had been constructing this version of me for everyone else. He interrupted me constantly during conversations, especially around other people. If I paused to remember a date or name, he would immediately jump in with that calm little smile. Mom gets mixed up sometimes. If I disagreed with him, he would sigh patiently like he was exhausted from managing me. Even Emily had perfected the act. She started labeling things inside my own kitchen. Large black letters on sticky notes. Coffee. Medications. Bills. At first glance it looked caring. But every label felt like evidence planted at a crime scene. One Sunday afternoon they invited me over for dinner again. I almost did not go, but I refused to become the isolated old woman they were trying to turn me into. The moment I walked into the house, I noticed something different. Daniel had removed my framed family photo from the hallway table and replaced it with a picture of him and Emily on a beach vacation in Florida. It was small. Petty even. But symbolic. My place in the family was already shrinking. During dinner, Daniel carefully steered every conversation toward aging. Retirement homes. Memory care facilities. An article about an elderly man wandering out of his neighborhood at night. Then he casually looked at me and asked, "Mom, did you ever find your car keys after losing them last month?" I stared at him. "I did not lose my keys. You called me looking for them. Because you borrowed my car to pick up mulch for your yard." Emily suddenly became very interested in cutting her chicken parmesan. Claire looked uncomfortable. Daniel only smiled. Right. Maybe that was it. Maybe. That word sat there like poison. Designed to create doubt without sounding accusatory. After dinner I excused myself to use the downstairs bathroom, but halfway down the hallway I heard voices coming from Daniel's home office. The door was slightly open. "The neurologist appointment is next Thursday," Emily whispered. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Daniel let out a quiet laugh. "Mom still thinks this is about helping her." I froze completely. "As long as the doctor documents memory concerns, the financial transition will be easier," he continued. "Once we have power of attorney, everything settles down." Financial transition. Power of attorney. My hand started trembling so badly, I had to steady myself against the hallway wall. Emily lowered her voice further. "What if she refuses?" Daniel answered immediately. "Then we push harder. The family already believes she is declining." I could barely breathe. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to walk into that office and confront them, but something stopped me. Maybe pride. Maybe survival. Because for the first time, I understood something terrifying. This was no longer emotional manipulation. This was strategy. Carefully planned strategy. I quietly stepped back before they noticed me and returned to the dining room pretending nothing had happened. Claire was clearing plates when she looked up at me. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked softly. I forced a smile that probably looked painful. "Just tired, sweetheart." On the drive home, rain pounded against my windshield so hard I could barely see the road. I kept hearing Daniel's voice repeating inside my head. "The family already believes she is declining." That was the true horror of it. He was not trying to convince me anymore. He was trying to convince everyone else first. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I realized something else that made my chest tighten with fear. If Daniel was willing to manipulate doctors and family members, then I had absolutely no idea how far he was prepared to go next. The neurologist appointment was scheduled for the following Thursday at 9:30 in the morning, and Daniel informed me about it the way a parent reminds a child about a dentist visit. He called the night before and said, "Do not worry, Mom. I will pick you up early so we have time for paperwork." Paperwork. That word made my stomach tighten every single time now. I barely slept that night. Around 4 in the morning I gave up completely and sat in my kitchen listening to the hum of the refrigerator while staring out at the dark street through the window above my sink. For the first time in my life, I felt afraid of my own son. Not because I thought he would hurt me physically. Daniel was too polished for that. Too controlled. No, what terrified me was how calmly he was dismantling my credibility piece by piece while making himself look compassionate. By 8:30 he was in my driveway carrying 2 coffees from Starbucks and acting cheerful. "Thought you could use something warm," he said as if we were heading to brunch instead of a medical evaluation designed to question my sanity. During the drive he kept talking non-stop about traffic, weather, Claire's grades, anything except the actual appointment. But every few minutes he slipped in little comments that made my chest tighten. "You seemed confused on the phone yesterday. Do you remember the name of your medication? You know it is okay to ask for help." It was subtle enough that an outsider might think he was being caring. But I could hear the setup underneath every sentence. The clinic was located in a clean brick medical building outside Columbus, with soft instrumental music playing in the lobby, and bowls of peppermint candy on every table. The receptionist smiled warmly at Daniel first before even looking at me. "You must be Margaret," she said gently. Gently again. Everyone suddenly spoke to me gently now. Daniel filled out most of the paperwork himself, while I sat beside him pretending not to notice that he checked boxes, without asking me questions first. Memory concerns. Difficulty managing finances. Episodes of confusion. I watched his pen move across the forms while anger burned inside my chest so hard I thought I might explode right there in the waiting room. Then something unexpected happened. A nurse called my name and Daniel stood up immediately beside me. "Family can wait. Here for the first assessment," she said politely. Daniel smiled. "Actually, due to her condition, it helps if I stay." Her expression shifted slightly. Dr. Keller usually prefers speaking with patients privately first. For the first time all morning, Daniel looked irritated. Only for a second. But I saw it. Inside the examination room, Dr. Keller turned out to be a woman around my age with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She asked me simple memory questions first. Dates. Names. Short recall exercises. Then she gradually moved into more detailed conversations about current events, finances, medications, and daily routines. I answered everything clearly, calmly, honestly. Every time I spoke, Daniel tried to interrupt. Mom gets embarrassed about mistakes. She forgets incidents afterward. Last month she misplaced important documents. Finally Dr. Keller turned toward him with a polite smile that somehow still felt firm. Mr. Whitmore, I would like to hear your mother answer directly. Silence filled the room for several seconds after that. I noticed Daniel lean back in his chair slightly, crossing his arms. Dr. Keller continued the evaluation for nearly 45 minutes. The more we talked, the more relaxed I became because for the first time in weeks, someone was actually listening to me instead of watching for signs of failure. At the end of the appointment, Daniel stepped out to take a phone call while the nurse printed paperwork near the front desk. Dr. Keller closed the office door quietly behind him and lowered her voice. Mrs. Whitmore, she said carefully, have you personally requested assistance managing your finances? No, I answered immediately. She studied my face for a long moment. Do you feel safe at home? I blinked in surprise. Yes. Why would you ask that? Dr. Keller opened a desk drawer slowly and slid a small business card toward me. Elder Law and Financial Protection Services. My pulse started pounding again. I am not diagnosing dementia, she said calmly. And I strongly recommend you speak with someone independent before signing any legal documents. For a moment I could not even speak. Because in that quiet office, with fluorescent lights humming softly above us, a complete stranger had just confirmed the one thing I had been too terrified to fully admit to myself. I was not imagining any of this. After the appointment with Dr. Keller, something inside me changed permanently. Until then, part of me had still hoped this was all some terrible misunderstanding. A son becoming overprotective. A family overreacting. But the moment that Doctor quietly slid that business card across her desk, I understood the truth. Daniel was not trying to help me. He was building a legal case around me. And if I wanted to survive it, I needed to stop reacting emotionally and start paying attention the way he did. Calmly. Carefully. Quietly. 2 days later I drove to my bank branch on the east side of town instead of the closer location Daniel usually used for his financial accounts. I did not tell anyone where I was going. The business card from Dr. Keller sat folded inside my purse beside my checkbook, while my hands trembled against the steering wheel almost the entire drive there. I kept thinking about all the years I trusted Daniel completely. He had handled his late father's retirement paperwork after the funeral. He helped neighbors with investments. People in our town respected him. And somehow that made this betrayal feel even uglier, because he knew exactly how financial systems worked. He knew which forms mattered. Which phrases triggered concern. Which signatures could change everything. Inside the bank, the air smelled faintly like printer toner and coffee. I sat down with a branch manager named Susan Miller, a woman around 50 with dark glasses hanging from a silver chain around her neck. I told her I wanted to review all recent activity connected to my accounts. At first she smiled politely and typed quietly into her computer. Then her expression slowly changed. Mrs. Whitmore, she said carefully, did you authorize Daniel Whitmore to request secondary administrative access? I felt cold all over. No, Susan looked back at the screen. There are multiple notes here regarding cognitive concerns submitted over the past 3 weeks. 3 weeks? This had started before the birthday dinner. Long before. What kind of concerns? I asked quietly. Susan hesitated before turning the monitor slightly toward me. There it was in black and white. Client displaying signs of memory deterioration. Family recommends protective monitoring. Potential vulnerability regarding independent financial decisions. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might faint right there in the office. He wrote this. Susan nodded slowly. There were also inquiries regarding durable power of attorney paperwork. For a moment I could not speak at all. My own son had been documenting me like I was a declining patient instead of his mother. Susan lowered her voice slightly. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask directly. Do you currently feel capable of managing your finances independently? I looked straight at her. Completely. She studied me carefully for several seconds, then nodded once. That is not the impression these notes are attempting to create. Attempting. The word hit me hard because it confirmed something important. Daniel had not succeeded yet. He was still building the narrative. Susan printed copies of every internal note connected to my accounts, while I sat silently trying to steady my breathing. Then she pointed toward one specific document request. This concerns me, she admitted quietly. There was an inquiry about transferring your retirement account into joint management. I stared at the paper. My retirement account held nearly $400,000. Money my husband and I spent 40 years building together. Daniel had not only been preparing to control my checking account. He had been positioning himself to access everything. Suddenly all the small humiliations made sense. The comments about forgetting things. The labels in my kitchen. The fake concern. None of it was random. It was groundwork. As Susan handed me the paperwork, she leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Whitmore, I strongly recommend changing your passwords immediately and removing all third-party communication permissions from your accounts. I nodded slowly. Can that be done today? Absolutely. For the next hour we changed everything. Passwords. Security questions. Contact permissions. Mailing preferences. I even rented a new safe deposit box under private access instructions. When I finally walked back to my car carrying the envelope of documents against my chest, I felt emotionally exhausted, but strangely clear-headed for the first time in weeks. Then my phone buzzed. Daniel. I stared at his name glowing on the screen while my pulse quickened. The moment I answered, his voice sounded unusually sharp. Mom, he said carefully, why did the bank just remove my account access? I looked out through the windshield at the gray Ohio sky and realized something important. Daniel was no longer calmly controlling the situation. For the first time since this nightmare began, he sounded nervous. Daniel came to my house less than 20 minutes after that phone call from the bank. I saw his black SUV pull into my driveway through the living room curtains, while I was still sitting in my armchair holding the envelope of bank documents against my chest. For a brief second, panic rushed through me so fast I almost locked every door in the house. But then something unexpected happened. I stopped feeling afraid. Not because the situation was less dangerous, but because I finally understood it clearly. Confusion had been my weakness. Clarity changed everything. Daniel knocked twice before letting himself in with the spare key he still had. The sound of that lock turning made anger rise in my chest instantly. He stepped inside wearing that same controlled expression he always used now, calm and polished like a man trying to manage a difficult situation professionally. Mom, he said carefully, why are you making sudden changes at the bank without talking to me? I looked directly at him. Because it is my money. A flicker crossed his face. Irritation. Just for a second. You are overreacting, he replied. The bank called me concerned because this kind of impulsive behavior can happen when people are scared or confused. There it was again. Every emotion I showed became evidence against me. I stood up slowly from my chair. You told them I have cognitive decline. Daniel sighed heavily, rubbing his forehead. Like an exhausted caretaker. Mom, Dr. Keller said there are memory concerns. No, I answered quietly. She did not. Silence filled the room. Daniel stared at me carefully then, studying my face the same way gamblers study a poker table, after realizing the cards have changed. What exactly did she tell you? He asked slowly. For the first time in weeks, I noticed uncertainty in his voice. I almost told him everything right there. About the business card. About the bank documents. About the notes he had submitted behind my back. But instinct stopped me. Because suddenly I understood something important. Daniel believed I was still emotionally overwhelmed and easy to manipulate. He did not realize I had started paying attention. So instead of confronting him, I simply shook my head. I am tired, Daniel. His shoulders relaxed slightly. He thought he had regained control. Maybe you should rest for a few days, he said gently. Emily and I were actually discussing whether it might be safer if you stayed with us for a while. Safer? Another trap disguised as kindness. No thank you. Mom? I said no. His jaw tightened slightly before the polite smile returned again. Okay. But you cannot keep making financial decisions impulsively. People are worried. People. Always people. Invisible people supposedly concerned about me while Daniel quietly spoke for all of them. Before leaving, he walked through my kitchen slowly, glancing around almost absently. Then he stopped near the counter where my mail sat unopened beside a bowl of fruit. You really should let me organize these bills for you, he said casually. I am managing just fine. He smiled again. Of course you are. But the moment he left, I noticed something chilling. One envelope was missing from the counter. My latest retirement statement. I stood there staring at the empty spot on the marble countertop, while cold realization spread through my chest. Daniel had not come here to check on me. He came to see what I knew. That evening, Claire called unexpectedly around 7:30. Her voice sounded nervous. Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course. She hesitated. Did Dad ever ask you to sign papers recently? My grip tightened around the phone. Why? Another pause. Because yesterday, I saw him printing documents at home. One of them said durable power of attorney at the top. My pulse started pounding again. Claire lowered her voice even more. And Grandma? I think Mom knows it is wrong. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. What do you mean? I heard them arguing after the bank removed Dad's access. Mom said they needed to stop pushing so hard. And what did your father say? Claire went quiet for several seconds before answering softly. He said if they waited too long, you might change everything before they secured it. Secured it? Like I was some unstable investment account instead of his mother. Tears burned behind my eyes, but this time they came from anger more than heartbreak. Claire suddenly whispered, Grandma. I do not think Dad expected you to fight back. Neither did I. But late that night, sitting alone at my dining room table with copies of the bank documents spread around me, I made a decision that changed the course of everything. I stopped thinking like a frightened old woman being cornered by her family. And I started thinking like someone gathering evidence. The next 3 weeks became the strangest period of my entire life, because I was pretending to be weak while secretly preparing for war. Every morning I acted exactly the way Daniel expected me to act. Quiet. Emotional. Slightly overwhelmed. I let him believe his manipulation was still working because people reveal more when they think they are winning. Meanwhile, I started documenting everything. Every phone call. Every strange comment. Every missing document. I bought a small digital recorder from an electronics store 40 minutes away so nobody in town would recognize me, and I kept it hidden inside my purse anytime Daniel came near me. The hardest part was pretending not to notice how much worse he was becoming. Once Daniel realized I had removed his banking access, the mask slipped more often. Not publicly. Never publicly. In front of others he remained the devoted son trying to help his struggling mother. But privately, his patience had started cracking. One afternoon he showed up unexpectedly while I was trimming roses in the front yard. "You missed your medication this morning," he said immediately. I stared at him in confusion. "How would you know that?" He froze for half a second before answering too quickly. "Emily noticed when she organized your pill box." Organized? Such a harmless-sounding word for something that suddenly felt invasive. I kept my voice calm. "I do not need anyone organizing my medication." Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mom, you are making this harder than it needs to be." Harder. Not painful. Not emotional. Harder. Like I was complicating a process already in motion. Later that evening Claire texted me asking if she could stop by after school the next day. When she arrived, she looked nervous enough that my chest tightened immediately. She sat at my kitchen table twisting the sleeve of her sweatshirt around her fingers before finally whispering, "Dad is planning something for Thanksgiving." I stayed very still. "What kind of something?" Claire swallowed hard. "He told Mom the family needs to discuss your living situation." Living situation. Another sanitized phrase hiding something ugly underneath it. "Did he say anything else?" Claire nodded slowly. "He thinks if everybody is there together, you will feel pressured to agree." I looked down at my coffee cup, suddenly understanding the shape of Daniel's plan completely. Thanksgiving was not going to be a family dinner. It was going to be an intervention. Public pressure. Emotional humiliation. Legal paperwork. And if I reacted emotionally in front of everyone, Daniel would use that too. Claire leaned closer across the table. "Grandma, I think he already has documents prepared." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for telling me." Her eyes filled with tears immediately. "I do not understand why he is doing this." Neither did I. Not completely. Greed explained part of it. Control explained another part. But there was something colder underneath Daniel now. Something ambitious. As if managing me had become a project he needed to complete successfully. The following Monday I met privately with an elder law attorney named Rebecca Collins in a quiet office above a hardware store downtown. I brought everything. Bank records. Notes. Copies of account requests. Even transcripts I had typed from recorded conversations with Daniel. Rebecca listened silently for almost 2 hours without interrupting once. When I finally finished speaking, she leaned back slowly in her chair and said something that made my stomach twist. "Mrs. Whitmore, this pattern is more common than you think." Common. The word horrified me. Rebecca explained how financial exploitation often begins with gradual reputation damage. Convince people the older person is confused first. Then isolate them emotionally. Then take control of communication, finances, transportation, medication. By the time legal paperwork appears, the victim already looks unreliable to everyone around them. "But you have one major advantage," Rebecca added quietly. "You recognized it before he secured legal authority." Secured. The same word Claire said Daniel used. Rebecca helped me prepare new legal protections immediately. Updated estate documents. Medical directives. Financial restrictions. And then she asked one final question before I left. "Do you want to confront him privately?" I thought about that for several seconds before shaking my head slowly. No, because suddenly I understood something important about men like Daniel. Private confrontation would only give him time to rewrite the story again. No. If the humiliation had been public from the beginning, then the truth needed to become public too. And by the time Thanksgiving finally arrived, I was no longer walking into that house as a frightened old woman being cornered by her family. I was walking in with evidence. Thanksgiving at Daniel's house looked exactly like every perfect American holiday commercial I had ever seen. Warm yellow lights wrapped around the porch railing. A giant turkey sat in the center of the dining table beside bowls of mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce, and homemade stuffing. Christmas music played softly from the kitchen speaker even though it was still November. From the outside, we looked like a happy family gathering. Together for another holiday. But underneath all those smiling faces sat weeks of manipulation, lies, and quiet betrayal. I arrived 10 minutes early carrying a pumpkin pie from the bakery downtown, and a leather folder tucked carefully inside my purse. The moment Daniel opened the front door, I could see relief flash across his face. He thought I had come alone and unprepared. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom," he said warmly, kissing my cheek for show. Emily hovered behind him smiling nervously while relatives filled the house with casual conversation and football noise from the television in the living room. Claire met me near the hallway and squeezed my hand gently before whispering, "Dad printed the papers this morning." I nodded once. "I know." Dinner started pleasantly enough. My sister Linda talked about her church fundraiser. Emily described Black Friday shopping plans. Daniel carved turkey at the head of the table like some proud suburban patriarch taking care of everyone around him. And through the entire meal, I noticed him studying me constantly. Waiting. Measuring my mood. Looking for weakness. Finally, just as dessert plates were being passed around, Daniel placed his napkin neatly beside his plate and cleared his throat. The room slowly quieted. "Before everybody leaves tonight," he began carefully, "there is something important we need to discuss as a family." There it was. The intervention. My heart pounded hard enough that I could hear it in my ears, but outwardly I remained completely calm. Daniel folded his hands together with practiced concern. "As everybody knows, Mom has been struggling lately." Linda immediately looked uncomfortable, while Emily lowered her eyes sadly like a woman carrying emotional burden. Daniel continued speaking softly, professionally, almost like a doctor delivering difficult news. "We have all noticed increasing memory issues over the past few months. Confusion. Missed bills. Emotional outbursts. Emotional outbursts." I almost laughed at the absurdity of hearing my own pain presented as evidence against me. After speaking with specialists, Daniel continued, "Emily and I believe it may be safest for Mom to transition into assisted living where professionals can support her daily needs." The room became painfully quiet. I could feel people avoiding eye contact with me already. Daniel reached beside his chair and lifted a stack of documents onto the table. "These are temporary financial protection forms, so we can help manage expenses during the transition." Temporary protection. Every ugly thing hidden behind polite language. Then Daniel slid the paperwork slowly toward me along with a silver pen. "Mom," he said gently, "we only want what is best for you." I looked down at the documents without touching them. Durable power of attorney. Asset management authorization. Property oversight agreements. Everything prepared in advance. Everything waiting for my signature while my entire family watched. For a few seconds nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then I slowly reached into my purse and removed my own folder instead. Daniel's expression shifted immediately. Confusion first. Then concern. Then fear. "Before I sign anything," I said calmly, I think everyone deserves to see a few things. I placed several documents onto the table one by one. Independent cognitive evaluation results. Bank statements. Copies of internal banking notes submitted by Daniel. The room stayed completely silent except for the faint sound of football commentators in the other room. Emily's face went pale almost instantly. Daniel stared at the papers without touching them. "Mom," he said carefully, "this is not necessary." I ignored him and slid a small digital recorder onto the table. Then I pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the dining room clearly. "As long as the doctor documents memory concerns, the financial transition will be easier." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Claire covered her mouth with her hand while Linda slowly turned toward Daniel in disbelief. The recording continued. "The family already believes she is declining." Emily closed her eyes. Daniel finally stood up abruptly from his chair. "This is being taken out of context." But his voice no longer sounded calm. It sounded panicked. I looked directly at my son for what felt like the first honest moment in weeks. "Read the last page," I said. Quietly. Daniel grabbed the final document with trembling hands. Rebecca Collins had prepared it personally. Formal notice revoking all attempted financial authority, and warning of documented elder financial manipulation. For the first time since this nightmare began, nobody was looking at me like I was confused. They were all staring at Daniel.